A single dad knocks on the door of the Hells Angels clubhouse at midnight and asks, "Can you protect my son?" The bikers ask the reason, and his answer leaves every man their heart broken. The knock comes quietly, not loud, not desperate, just careful, as if the man on the other side already knows what kind of door this is and the weight of the help he is asking for. Cold, biting air slips inside as the heavy steel door creaks open. A few men look up from the back of the room, and there he stands, a tired father, drenched in a sudden midnight downpour, holding the hand of a 7-year-old boy who looks like he hasn't slept in days. Before we reveal the terrifying truth this father was hiding and the extreme lengths the Hells Angels went to keep this boy safe, I have to ask, who is standing with us today? Drop a comment below and tell us which city or country you are watching from. We love seeing how far our global brotherhood of viewers reaches. And if you believe that a father's love is the strongest force on earth, hit that subscribe button right now to join our family of protectors. Jax, the chapter president, stood in the doorway, his massive, tattooed frame silhouetted against the warm, amber glow of the clubhouse. He looked down at the man, David, and then at the boy, Leo. The night was bone-chillingly cold, and a thin mist was rolling off the pavement of the industrial district. David didn't look like the typical person who sought out the club. He wasn't a criminal, and he wasn't looking for a thrill. He was wearing a faded work jacket and worn-out leather boots, his face caked with the fine red dust of a long day's labor at the local quarry. But it was his eyes that stopped Jax in his tracks. They were wide, frantic, and haunted by a fear that went far beyond the physical. It was the look of a man who had reached the very end of his rope and found it was frayed to a single thread. "David," Jax said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that seemed to vibrate in the cold air. "You're a long way from the garage, man. It's midnight. What's going on? Why is the kid out in this weather?" David didn't answer with words at first. His jaw was locked tight, as if he were trying to keep his soul from leaking out. He simply pulled Leo closer to his side, his hand trembling slightly. The boy was clutching a tattered stuffed wolf, its fur matted and gray, his knuckles white with the effort of holding on. Leo didn't look at Jax. He kept his eyes fixed on the chrome of the bikes parked inside the foyer, his small chest heaving in shallow, rhythmic gasps of terror. "I don't have anywhere else to go, Jax," David finally rasped, his voice breaking like dry wood. "The police told me to wait. They told me there's a process. The social workers told me to trust the system. But Jax, the system is the one that's letting them in. The system is the one that's handing them the keys to my front door." Jax stepped back, a silent invitation, gesturing for them to enter. The clubhouse was quiet tonight, the heavy scent of stale coffee, expensive bourbon, and gasoline lingering in the air. A few of the brothers, including Big Mike and T-Bone, sat at the heavy oak bar in the back, their eyes tracking the newcomers with a mixture of hardened curiosity and a strange, protective suspicion. David sat on the very edge of a wooden chair, refusing to lean back, as if he needed to be ready to bolt at any second. "Talk to me," Jax said, pulling up a stool across from him, his own tattooed arms crossed over his chest. "Who is them? And why the hell are you at my door at midnight? We've known each other a long time, David. You fixed my bikes for a decade. I know you're an honest man. So tell me what kind of monster makes an honest man look like he's waiting for the executioner." David looked down at his son, who had finally leaned his head against his father's leg, his eyes fluttering with exhaustion. A single, heavy tear tracked through the grime on David's cheek. "It started with Maria," David began, his voice dropping so low the bikers had to lean in to hear him. "My wife, she wasn't just a clerk at Apex Corp, Jax. She was a whistleblower. She discovered that the chemical runoff they were dumping into the local reservoir, the same water the elementary school used, was polluting the water. She had the samples, the lab photos, and the list of every council member and police captain who was paid to look the other way. 2 weeks ago, She died in that hit and run on 5th Street. The police called it an accident. They told me she must have been distracted. But I know she was running. She was running for her life. The room went deathly silent. The bikers were well aware of Apex Corporation. They were the biggest employer in the county, the invisible hand that kept the town running while poisoning its veins. They think I have the data, Jax, David continued, his voice shaking now. They've been following us for 10 days. I see the black SUVs at the end of my street every night. I hear the clicks on my phone line. Tonight I came home and found a man sitting in Leo's bedroom. He didn't steal anything. He didn't break a window. He was just sitting there in the dark, holding a knife, waiting for me to walk in. He told me that if Maria's files aren't returned by tomorrow morning, Leo will be placed in a better home by the state, a home where I'll never find him. They have the law, the judges, and the hitmen on their payroll. I'm just a mechanic with a 7-year-old son and no one to call. Jax felt a surge of cold, familiar fury. He looked at Big Mike, whose knuckles were turning white as he gripped the edge of the bar. Mike had a son of his own, and the look in his eyes was lethal. You're asking the Hells Angels to hide a kid from a billion-dollar company and the entire local government? Jax asked, his eyes narrowing. David looked Jax directly in the eye, the desperation finally boiling over into a raw, heartbreaking plea. I'm asking you to be the wall they can't climb over, Jax. I'm asking you to be the only thing in this world that isn't for sale. I'm asking you to save my son. Jax stood up, his leather vest creaking. He didn't look at David. He looked at the boy. He walked over and knelt down, bringing himself to Leo's level. He looked at the tattered stuffed wolf. That wolf looks like he's seen some battles, Leo, Jax said softly, his voice losing its iron edge. You know what wolves do when the wind gets cold? Leo shook his head shyly, clutching the toy tighter. They protect the pack, Jax said. And starting right now, you and your dad, you're part of ours. And we don't let anyone touch our pack. Jax stood back up and turned to T-Bone. Lock the gates. Scramble the frequencies. If a bird flies over this clubhouse tonight, I want to know its blood type. David, take the boy to the back room. Mike, you're on the door. If Apex Corp wants this child, they're going to have to go through every one of us first. Just as the words left Jax's mouth, a low, menacing hum began to echo from the street. The sound of 3 heavy V8 engines pulling up to the perimeter gate. The hunters had arrived, but they hadn't realized they were no longer dealing with a lone father. They were dealing with a brotherhood of iron. Jax walked to the front window and pulled back the heavy curtain. 3 black SUVs, their windows tinted dark as midnight, sat idling at the gate. No license plates, no markings, just the cold, predatory presence of men who thought they were untouchable. T-Bone, Jax called out without turning around. Fire up the external monitors. I want every angle recorded. If they so much as breathe on that gate, I want it on every server from here to Vegas. T-Bone nodded, his fingers flying across a laptop screen. Cameras are live, Jax. We've got thermal on the SUVs. For men in each vehicle. They're geared up, Jax. Body armor, tactical headsets. This isn't just security. This is a wetworks team. Jax stepped back from the window. He looked at David, who was holding Leo so tight it looked like he was trying to merge with the boy. David, listen to me. Take Leo into the basement vault. It's reinforced steel and concrete. Mike will stay with you. Do not open that door for anyone but me. Do you understand? David nodded, his eyes wide with a mix of terror and a new, flickering hope. Thank you, Jax. I didn't think anyone would help. We aren't just helping, David, Jax said as he reached for a heavy chain-link belt. We're making a statement. As Mike led David and Leo into the back, Jax turned to the rest of the brothers. About 15 men stood in the clubhouse now, all of them veterans of the road and the shadows. They didn't need a speech. They knew what was at stake. They think they can walk into our house and snatch a kid because they have corporate lawyers and corrupt cops behind them, Jax said. his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. They think we're just outlaws. Let's show them that outlaws have a longer memory and a harder hit than any executive in a suit. A heavy, metallic thud echoed through the room. Someone was at the gate, using a ram. T-Bone, open the gate, Jax commanded. The brothers looked at him in surprise. Jax, you want to let them in? No, Jax said, a dark smile spreading across his face. I want to let them get close enough to see the mistake they're making. Open the gate, and tell the boys to get the bikes ready. If they want a war, we'll give them one they can't lobby their way out of. The gate hummed as it slid open. The 3 SUVs didn't hesitate. They roared onto the gravel lot, kicking up dust and rain, and screeched to a halt in a semicircle around the clubhouse entrance. The doors flew open, and 12 men in black tactical gear stepped out. They held their weapons at the low ready, their movements synchronized and robotic. At the center of the group stood a man in a sharp, gray suit that cost more than David's house. He didn't look like a soldier. He looked like a man who signed checks for soldiers. He stepped forward, adjusting his tie as if he were walking into a boardroom. Jax, the man shouted over the wind. My name is Sterling. I'm the chief of security for Apex Corporation. We know you have David Miller and his son inside. We have a court-ordered emergency custody warrant for the child. Hand them over, and we can all go back to sleep. Resist, and I'll have the National Guard down here by sunrise to level this place. Jax stepped out onto the porch, alone. He stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at Sterling and his armed goons. He didn't have a gun in his hand. He had a cigarette. He lit it, the flame of the lighter casting a brief, jagged glow on his face. Sterling, Jax said, blowing a cloud of smoke into the rain. You've got a lot of toys for a guy who's just serving a warrant. But you see, you made a mistake. You came to a Hells Angels clubhouse at midnight. Out here, your warrants don't mean much more than toilet paper. And your National Guard threat? That's cute. But I think you'll find that my brothers have a few friends in high places, too. Sterling sneered, gesturing to his team. I'm not here to debate you, Jax. Move aside, or we move through you. Jax leaned against the doorframe, looking completely unbothered. You know, Maria was a good woman, Sterling. She cared about this town. She cared about the kids drinking that poison water. It's a shame what happened to her. But Leo? He's got his mother's spirit. And he's got something else now, too. Jax whistled once, a sharp, piercing sound. Suddenly, the silence of the industrial district was shattered. From the dark alleys on either side of the clubhouse, the roar of 50 Harley engines erupted at once. Headlights cut through the darkness, blinding the tactical team. From every corner of the lot, more Hells Angels appeared, their bikes forming a tight, vibrating circle around the 3 SUVs. They weren't just the local chapter. Jax had called in the neighboring charters. Within seconds, Sterling and his 12 men were surrounded by nearly 80 bikers, all of them armed, all of them looking for a reason. Sterling's face went pale. He looked around at the wall of leather and chrome. His tactical team shifted their aim, their eyes darting back and forth as they realized they were vastly outnumbered. You were saying something about moving through me? Jax asked, stepping down the first stair. I'm right here, Sterling. Let's see how far your company's insurance policy goes when the thunder hits. 5-second pause, AD slot. The standoff was absolute. The only sound was the idling of 80 engines and the heavy rain hitting the hoods of the SUVs. Sterling looked at Jax, then at the silent, stone-faced men surrounding him. He knew he had lost this round. But as he reached for his radio, a new sound began to approach from the distance. The high-pitched wail of police sirens. The law is here, Jax, Sterling hissed, a desperate grin returning to his face. Let's see how your pack handles the precinct. Jax didn't move. He just looked at the approaching lights and whispered to himself, Good. I've been waiting for them. The blue and red lights of the approaching police cruisers danced across the rain-slicked pavement of the industrial district, reflecting off the polished chrome of 80 idling Harleys like a strobe light in a fever dream. Sterling, the Apex Corp security chief, stood taller now, his confidence returning like a physical suit of armor as he adjusted his expensive silk tie. He looked at the massive steel gates of the Hells Angels clubhouse and then back at the approaching sirens. In his mind, the arrival of the local precinct meant the end of the game. He believed the law would do what his hired guns couldn't, force the outlaws to bend the knee and hand over the boy. But as the 6 patrol cars screeched to a halt, boxing in the bikers from the rear, Jax didn't move an inch. He didn't drop his cigarette, and he didn't look toward the sirens. He kept his eyes locked on Sterling, watching the man's smug satisfaction with a cold, predatory patience. Before we reveal the final, heartbreaking secret David told Jax in the basement, and the shocking way the Hells Angels dismantled a billion-dollar empire in a single night, I have to ask, are you still riding with us? Drop a comment below with the word justice if you believe the truth always comes to light. We love seeing our global brotherhood of viewers grow. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to ensure you never miss a story of the road's true guardians. Your support helps us tell the stories that the mainstream media is too afraid to touch. Captain Miller, a man whose face was etched with the stress of a decade spent balancing corporate bribes with public service, stepped out of the lead cruiser. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like a man trapped between 2 fires. He looked at the sea of leather vests, the various patches of the charters that had answered Jax's call, and finally at Sterling. The air was thick with the smell of ozone, wet asphalt, and the metallic tang of a brewing storm. Miller knew that one wrong move tonight would spark a war that would burn the town to the ground. "Jax!" Miller shouted, his voice strained and cracking under the weight of the moment. "We have a report of a kidnapping and a riot in progress. This is an illegal assembly. Disperse these men and hand over the Miller child immediately. This is your only warning, Jax. Don't throw your club away for a mechanic and his kid. This is bigger than you." Jax stepped off the porch and walked slowly toward the gate. Every step was deliberate, his heavy boots crunching on the gravel in a perfect, menacing rhythm. The Hells Angels parted for him like a black tide, their faces stoic and unreadable. He stopped just inches from the iron bars, looking Miller directly in the eye. "Kidnapping? That's a strong word for a father seeking sanctuary, Captain," Jax said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that seemed to emanate from his chest. "I've got a man and his son in my house seeking protection from a group of armed mercenaries who don't have a single license to carry in this state. As for a riot, my brothers are just having a late-night constitutional. Last I checked, the First Amendment still applied to men who wear leather. Or does the Apex Corp payroll keep you from reading the Bill of Rights?" "The warrant is legal, Jax," Sterling interjected, stepping forward and waving a manila folder like a weapon. "The father is mentally unstable, a danger to himself and the child. We have the court-ordered emergency custody papers right here. Open the gate, or the captain will be forced to use gas. We are taking that boy back to safety." Jax didn't even acknowledge Sterling's presence. He kept his gaze fixed on Miller. "You sure you want to go down this road, Captain? You sure you want to be the face of the men who snatched a 7-year-old boy for a company that's been pumping poison into the reservoir our children drink from? Because while you were driving here, we weren't just sitting around drinking coffee. We were doing the job the precinct was too scared to do." Jax signaled over his shoulder without looking. T-Bone stepped forward, holding a ruggedized, military-grade tablet. He turned the screen toward the police dash cams, ensuring the footage was being recorded by the very system the police used to secure evidence. On the screen was a live upload of the files Maria had died to protect, the ghost drive that David had brought in his pocket. "We spent the last hour decrypting the data, Captain," Jax said. "Maria was a genius. She didn't just find the dump sites. She documented the flow of money. It's all there. The payroll logs for special services. The high-resolution photos of the chemical barrels are buried less than a mile from the elementary school. And most importantly, The direct wire transfers from an Apex subsidiary to a shell company owned by your brother-in-law. It's a paper trail that leads straight to your front door, Miller. It's not a kidnapping case anymore. It's a racketeering case. The color drained from Captain Miller's face, leaving him looking sickly and gray in the flashing strobe of the police lights. The officers standing behind him, local men who lived in this town, who had children in those schools, began to look at each other. They weren't moving toward the gate anymore. They were moving away from their captain. The tension shifted. It wasn't police versus bikers anymore. It was truth versus betrayal. "You're bluffing," Miller stammered, his hand shaking as he touched his holster. "You couldn't have cracked those files that fast. Those are encrypted with military-grade software." "I didn't have to crack them," Jax replied. Maria was smart. She didn't just encrypt them. She set them to auto-upload to a secure cloud server if her personal heart rate monitor went flat for more than 10 minutes. The ghost drive David brought? That was just the physical key to release the final batch of documents. And the moment those cruisers turned onto this street, that key was turned. The FBI and every major news outlet in the state have the files now. You aren't here to save a boy, Miller. You're here to destroy the evidence. But you're too late. The thunder is already here, and it's loud enough to wake the dead. The heavy steel door of the clubhouse opened with a slow, mournful creak. Big Mike stepped out, but he wasn't holding a weapon. He was carrying little Leo, who was still clutching his raggedest stuffed wolf. David walked beside them, his shoulders finally square, his head held high for the first time since his wife's funeral. He looked at the police, the mercenaries, and the dark sky, and he didn't look afraid. Jax gestured for them to stay back, then turned his attention to the heartbreaking reason that had brought David to his door at midnight. "Tell them, David," Jax commanded, his voice echoing across the lot. "Tell them why they were so desperate to get their hands on your son before the world could see those files. Tell them what kind of monsters they really are." David stepped to the edge of the porch, the rain matting his hair to his forehead and soaking through his thin jacket. It wasn't just the data on the drive. My wife knew they were coming for her. She knew that if she died, they would search the house, the car, and even my locker at the garage. So she did something only a mother could think of. She didn't hide the physical samples, the raw evidence of the poison, in a safe or a bank vault. She opened the seam of Leo's stuffed wolf, the one he's had since the day he was born. She put the vials and the hard copy ledger inside, and sewed it back up with a needle and thread. David's voice broke as he looked at his son, his eyes filled with a raw, agonizing love. She told Leo that as long as he kept the wolf safe, her spirit would be with him. She knew he would never let go of that toy. She knew he would fight for it more than anything else in the world because it was his last link to her. They weren't coming for Leo because they wanted to protect him. They were coming for him because they wanted to rip that wolf out of his hands, cut it open, and burn the only proof left of their crimes. They were going to steal a boy's only comfort to hide their own filth. The silence that followed was absolute. Not a single person moved. Not a single car engine revved. Even the wind seemed to die down, leaving only the sound of the rain hitting the asphalt. Every officer, every biker, and even the tactical team looked at the small, tattered gray wolf in the boy's hand. The heartbreaking reason wasn't just a father's sacrifice. It was a mother's final, genius act of maternal protection. She had turned a child's toy into a vessel for justice. Sterling's face twisted into a mask of pure, corporate malice. He saw his career, his wealth, and his freedom vanishing into the Nevada mud. "Take the boy," he screamed at his tactical team, his voice cracking with desperation. "Secure the evidence. I don't care about the bikers. Move in." But the tactical team didn't move. They looked at the 80 Hells Angels who had their hands on their handlebars, ready to roar. They looked at the police officers who were now stepping toward their own captain with handcuffs ready. The power Sterling thought he had was an illusion built on fear, and the fear had just changed sides. The men he had hired were professionals, and they knew when a contract was dead. "It's over, Sterling," Jack said, his voice cold as the grave. "You can leave in your SUVs, or you can leave in the back of Miller's cruisers. But if you so much as look at that boy again, I won't need a court order to handle you. I'll handle you the old-fashioned way." Sterling slumped back into his SUV, the tinted window rolling up to hide his shame. Jax turned back to Captain Miller. "Hand over your piece, Miller. You're done. Your own men aren't going to let you walk away from this one. They have to live in this town. You just used it." As the FBI arrived 30 minutes later to take custody of the evidence and the corrupt officials, the clubhouse lot became a scene of somber victory. The Hells Angels began to dismount, walking over to David and Leo. They weren't outlaws in this moment. They were the guardians of a boy who had been forgotten by the world. Big Mike set Leo down on the ground. The boy looked up at the wall of leather-clad giants, his eyes finally clear of the fog of terror. He walked up to Jax and held out the stuffed wolf, his small hand steady. "My mom said the wolf protects the pack," Leo whispered, his voice small but certain. Jax knelt down, his eyes softening as he looked at the boy. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, silver pin, the winged skull of the club. He pinned it gently to Leo's small jacket. "Your mom was right, Leo," Jax said. "But even a wolf needs a pack. You keep that toy safe. It's the most important thing in this county. And you remember this. You have 80 uncles who ride the thunder. If the wind ever gets cold again, you just whisper. We'll hear you from 100 miles away." The resolution of the Apex Corp scandal became the largest environmental and corruption case in the state's history. The company was dismantled by federal regulators. The reservoir was cleaned using the company's seized assets, and David Miller was awarded a settlement that ensured he and Leo would never have to worry about a roof over their heads again. But for David and Leo, the victory was simpler than money or headlines. They didn't have to look over their shoulders anymore. They didn't have to fear the shadows. Every Saturday morning, like clockwork, a low rumble still echoes through David's neighborhood. The neighbors don't call the police. They don't even close their blinds. They watch with a smile as Jax and Big Mike pull up to the driveway, not for business, but to take Leo for a ride or to help David in the garage. The town learned a valuable lesson that night. Sometimes, the people the world fears most are the only ones with the courage to do what's right. They learned that a leather vest can hold a heart of gold, and that a single dad's desperate knock can turn into the roar of justice that saves an entire community. What would you do to protect your family? Would you knock on the door of the outlaws, or would you trust a system that's failed you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand up to a bully when no one else would? If you want more stories of brotherhood, sacrifice, and the law of the road, hit that subscribe button and join our family. At Embrace the Journey, we believe that no one stands alone as long as there is thunder on the horizon. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story of the thunder.